At that instant I had that thought, I heard a voice seeming to come from behind my left shoulder. It said something like, "You want to see force? I'll show you force." The question was clearly rhetorical, and I understood that I was about to experience something whether I wanted to or not. The next instant, I found myself changed into a disembodied point of view, suspended in space, thousands of miles over the Amazon basin. I could see the curvature of the earth. The stars beyond showed steadily against the inky backdrop, and far below I could see swirls and eddies of clouds over the basin, and the nerve-like tracery of vast river systems. From the center of the basin rose the world tree in the form of an enormous Banisteriopsis vine. It was twisted into a helical form, and its flowering tops were just below my disembodied viewpoint. Its base was anchored to the earth far below, lost to vision in the depths of mists and clouds and distance that stretched between us, beneath me. As I gazed awestruck at this vision, the voice explained that the Amazon was the omphalos of the planet, and that the twisted rope-like Yggdrasil Mariri world tree was the linchpin that tied the three realms, the underworld, the earth, and the sky together. Somehow I understood, though no words were involved, that the Banisteriopsis vine was the embodiment of the plant intelligence that embraced and covered the earth, that together the community of the plant species that existed on the earth provided a nurturing energy that made life on earth possible. I understood that photosynthesis, that neat trick known only to green plants of making complex organic compounds from sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, was the force the UDV was talking about, and indeed was the force on which all life depends. I was reminded of the line from Dylan Thomas that photosynthesis is the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. In the next moment, I found myself instantly transported from my bodiless perch in space to the lightless depths beneath the surface of the earth. I had somehow become a sentient water molecule percolating randomly through the soil and lost amid the tangle of the enormous root fibers of the Banisteriopsis world tree. I could feel the coolness, the dampness of the soil surrounding me. I felt suspended in an enormous underground cistern, a single drop among billions of drops. This sensation lasted only a minute. Then I felt a definite sense of movement as squeezed by the implacable forces of irresistible osmotic pressures. I was rapidly translocated into the roots of the Banisteriopsis tree. The sense of the rising, speeding elevator returned, except this time I was being lifted rapidly through the vast pipes and tubes of the plant's vascular system. I was a single molecule of water tumbling through the myriad branches and forks of the vertical maze, which grew progressively narrower the higher I went. Finally, the sense of accelerating vertical movement eased off. I was now floating freely in a horizontal direction, no longer feeling pushed. I was suspended in the middle of a stream, flowing through an enormous vaulted tunnel. More than that, there was light at the end of the tunnel, a green light. With a start, I realized that I had just passed through the petiole of a sun-drenched leaf and was being shunted into progressively narrowing arteries as I was carried through the articulating veins toward some unknown destination. It helped that the voice, or my own narrative self, I'm not sure which, was providing occasional commentary on the stages of the journey as it unfolded. Desperately, I tried to remember my old lessons in plant physiology and anatomy. By this time, I had been given the wordless understanding that I was about to witness, indeed participate in, the central mystery of life on Earth. A water molecule's view of the process of photosynthesis. Suddenly, I was no longer suspended in the arterial stream of the leaf vein. I had somehow been transported into an enormous closed space, suffused with greenish light. Above me, I could see the domed, vaulted roof of the structure I was inside of, and I understood that I was inside a chloroplast. The roof was translucent, and beams of sunlight streamed through it like a bedroom window on a bright morning. In front of me were flat, layered structures looking like folded sheets stacked closely together, covered with antenna-shaped structures, all facing in the same direction, and all opened eagerly to receive the incoming light. I realized that these had to be the thylakoid membranes, the organelles within the chloroplast where the so-called light reaction takes place. The antenna-like structures covering them literally glowed and hummed with photonic energy. I could see that somehow this energy was being translocated through the membranes of the thylakoids they were mounted on. I recognized or understood that these antenna-like arrays were molecules of chlorophyll, and that the anchors that tied them to their membrane substrates were long tails of phytic acid that functioned as energy transducers, funneling the light energy collected by the flower-shaped receptors through the membranes and into the layers beneath it. Next thing I knew, I was beneath that membrane. I was being carried along as though borne on a conveyor belt. I could see the phytic acid chains dangling above and beyond them through the semi-transparent roof of the membrane, the flower-like porphyrin rings that formed the chlorophyll's light-gathering apparatus, loomed like the dishes of a radio telescope array. In the center of the space was what looked like a mottled flat surface, periodically being smited by enormous bolts of energy that emanated lightning-like from the phytic acid tails suspended above it. And on that altar, water molecules were being smashed to smithereens by the energy blasts. Consciousness exploded and died in a spasm of electron ecstasy as I was smited by the bolt of energy emitted by the phytic acid transducers, and my poor water molecule soul was split asunder. As the light energy was used to ionize the water, the oxygen liberated in the process rose with a shriek to escape from the chamber of horrors, while the electrons, liberated from their matrix, were shunted into the electron transport roller coaster, sliding down the chain of cytochromes like a dancer being passed from partner to partner, and into the waiting arms of photosystem 1, only to be blasted again by yet another photonic charge, bounced into the close but fleeting embrace of ferredoxin, the primary electron acceptor, ultimately captured by NADP+, to be used as bait to capture two elusive protons as a flame draws a moth to a candle. Suddenly I was outside the flattened thylakoid structures, which from my perspective looked like high-rise circular apartment buildings. I recognized that I was suspended in the stroma, the region outside the thylakoid membranes where the mysterious dark reaction takes place. The alchemical wedding, where the mysterious dark reaction takes place, the alchemical wedding that joins carbon dioxide to ribulose diphosphate, a shotgun marriage presided over by ribulose diphosphate, carboxylase, the first enzyme in the so-called pentose phosphate shunt. All was quiet, and for a moment I was floating free in darkness. Then, miraculously, miracles were by this time mundane. I realized that my disembodied point of view had been reincarnated again and was now embedded in the matrix of the newly reduced ribulose diphosphate carbon dioxide complex. The unstable intermediate was rapidly falling apart into two molecules of phosphoglycerate, which were grabbed and loaded on the merry-go-round by the first enzymes of the Calvin cycle. Dimly, I struggled to remember my early botany lessons and put names to what I was seeing. I recognized that I had entered the first phase of the pentose phosphate shunt, the biochemical pathway that builds the initial products of photosynthesis into complex sugars and sends them spinning from thence into the myriad pathways of biosynthesis that ultimately generate the molecular stuff of life. You'll have to excuse me. This kind of gets me emotional. Only a biochemist would. But there it is. I felt humbled, shaken, exhausted, and exalted all at the same time. Suddenly, I was ripped out of my molecular roller coaster ride, and my disembodied I was again suspended high over the Amazon basin. This time, there was no world tree arising from its center. It looked much like it must look from a spacecraft in orbit. The day was sunny. The vista stretching to the curved horizon was blue and green and bluish green. The vegetation below, threaded with shining rivers, looked like green mold covering an overgrown petri plate. Suddenly, I was racked with a sense of overwhelming sadness. Sadness mixed with fear for the delicate balance of life on this planet. The fragile processes that drive and sustain life, sadness for the fate of our planet, and its precious cargo. What will happen? What will happen if we destroy the Amazon? I thought to myself, what will become of us? What will become of life itself? If we allow this to happen, if we allow this destruction to continue, we cannot let this happen. It must be stopped at any cost. I was weeping. I felt miserable. I felt anger and rage directed toward my own rapacious, destructive species, scarcely aware of its own devastating power, a species that cares little about the swath of destruction it leaves in its wake as it thoughtlessly decimates ecosystems and burns thousands of acres of rainforest. I was filled with loathing and shame. Suddenly, again from behind my left shoulder, came a quiet voice. "You monkeys only think you're running things," it said. "You don't think we would really allow this to happen, do you?" And somehow I knew that the "we" in this statement was the entire community of species. That constitute the planetary biosphere. I knew that I had been given an inestimable gift, a piece of gnosis and wisdom straight from the heart-mind of planetary consciousness, planetary intelligence, conveyed in visions and brought and thought by an infinitely wise, incredibly ancient, and enormously compassionate ambassador to the human community. A sense of relief, tempered with hope, washed over me. The vision faded, and I opened my eyes to see my newfound friends and hosts all eagerly gathered around me. The ceremony had officially ended a few minutes earlier. I had been utterly oblivious to whatever was going on in the world beyond my closed eyelids. How was it, they said? How was it, they wanted to know? Did you feel the buhachera, the strange force? I smiled to myself, feeling overjoyed at the prospect of sharing the experience and knowing that I had indeed been allowed to experience the ultimate force, the vastly alien, incredibly complex molecular machine that is the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. Thank you. I'm not acting, 20 years later, this still just gets to me very deeply. And I think that, I think that this is one of the things that psychedelics teach us, one of the reasons that psychedelics are re-emerging in planetary consciousness because of this, the ecological urgency. This is the message that they are trying to get us to wake up to. Many people who have experienced ayahuasca, especially, being this sort of ambassador from the center of biodiversity on the planet, have not necessarily this experience, but they come away with a profound, sort of the lesson gets told to them very forcefully that nature is extremely precious. We have only one planet. We can't let this incredible gem of a planet be destroyed by the corporatization, by the rapacious activity of soulless governments and soulless corporations. We have to fight this. We have to fight it. These medicines are one way, or maybe the best way to do that, because they truly do change hearts and minds. People have these experiences and they change their lives and they go forward and they teach other people. And this is what I meant yesterday. These are our bioweapons. This is what we can fight back with. They're weapons in the sense that, they don't kill people, but they change hearts and minds, and that's what's got to happen. That's what has to happen. And, I'm a scientist by training, but I'm a human being, and there is an intuition, I think, that we all have, at least those of us who have been close to ayahuasca, that, there is an intelligence, that the planet itself is intelligent, and it knows that it is in deep trouble. And, we would like to think, we would like to believe that life is common in the universe. I believe it. I think that civilizations and life permeates the galaxy, permeates even beyond the galaxy. But we have no way of knowing, and we've never found another ecosystem that we could definitively say was a living ecosystem. This is the only one we have. And this is where we live. And we're really screwing it up. And we have to do something about that. And mostly we have to raise consciousness. And I think that's where these medicines come in. We're at this enormous, incredibly important historical and cultural transition where if enough people get the message, then things will change. And that's what these medicines can do. That's why these medicines have come out of the Amazon and other places to give us the message and say, basically, get this, people. You monkeys don't know anything, are not running things. You only think you're running things. You don't know shit. So sit down, shut up, and prepare to learn. And I think that's got to be the message that we propagate to the rest of the world. Thank you. Not you, of course. You are all incredibly beautiful, enlightened beings. You got the message. So that's not directed at you. That's directed at those other people who are not here, unfortunately. Okay. Thank you.